Hello and welcome. Scott Sommer here. So today we're going to talk about biofeedback and what that is and how it applies to our bodies. So there are 3 points to this. We're going to talk about ancient biofeedback and what that is, involving the pulse and the tongue, and understanding a little bit more about how the ancients had biofeedback and how they had to rely upon these senses of what was going on inside the body. The second part, we're going to talk about, modern technology and modern day feedback. So we know things like blood pressure and whatnot, and taking your temperature. So all these are important forms of modern research and modern technology. And then finally, we're going to talk about what we do today in the clinic as far as biofeedback and how that applies to our patients and how that can help you and your family and your friends. So let's get started. So biofeedback, defining what biofeedback is basically is you are measuring something in the body. In this case, let's just use the example of temperature. So say, for instance, you wanted to know how your body was doing with your temperature. You took your temperature, you decided the way you were going to do it, kind of like a research study, right? So when I was at Davis, we did a lot of research studies and whatnot in biochemistry. And so, say, for instance, you take your temperature underneath your tongue, like you traditionally do, right? So you leave it there for a couple minutes, take your temperature, say it's 96.5, and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, then you decide, hey, I want to know what's going on with my body when I'm not moving around, and called basal body temperature. So that's actually, by the way, the most effective way to measure the biofeedback of your temperature of your body and how that relates to, say, your thyroid. And so that's the example of biofeedback. So now let's dive into the first point, which is the ancient way to measure your body's concepts of biofeedback. So the ancient ways really had to rely on observation. So all they could do was rely on touch. So they would use pulse. So basically there's a radial pulse where you put 3 fingers over the wrist. And if you were to see this, it would be, I'd basically like playing a piano, 3 fingers rest over the wrist and as you're feeling somebody's pulse. Well, in Asian medicine, we actually believe there's actually the superficial pulse that you feel, and then you push a little deeper to feel how the deeper organs are working and how that pulse is feeling. So there's so many qualities to the pulse. There's literally, in ancient medicine, we believe there's like 30 to 50 different pulses that you can feel, from something called wiry, which is almost like a wire, or slippery, which are like, little pearls underneath the fingers, and so on. And so with that said, we know that this form of biofeedback, of feeling the pulse, was really important to the ancients, and we even use it today in the clinic. Another form is observation, is looking. So we look at the patient's complexion. So we know that the face represents the heart. And so if we have good complexion, such as a runner or somebody that exercises, they always have good-looking skin, typically, and they have good circulation because it shows up in their complexion and their face. Another part of observation is the ear. So we'd look for creases on the ear. So a crease that goes across the earlobe is a sign of pre-heart attack, a heart condition that somebody can have. Or we can look at the tongue and realize that if the tongue is very coated, the color of the coating and the thickness of the coating and the cracks on the tongue and the size of the tongue, if it's swollen or not, or if it had swollen, we call them basically swelling of the side of the tongue, or it has to do with, diabetes, or many things can be forming on the tongue because the tongue is really the only muscle we can see. So the ancients used all of these techniques of observation as well as smell. I mentioned in an earlier podcast that we can smell, either something smells burnt in the patient, which is a lung condition, or they smell sweet, which is a sign of diabetes, or they can smell putrid. Putrid smell is very common with people with cancer. There's actually a cancer smell that you smell in people's bodies and skin when their body is literally kind of not doing well and they're kind of rotting inside because the body can't get rid of toxins fast enough, which is what cancer is all about. So with that said, we use all of these ancient techniques and symptoms that we ask the patient, how are you feeling? How are you sleeping? Do you have pain? Where is it? And what's the quality of your pain? And all of these things have to do with the ancient biofeedback of Asian medicine. So now let's go to our second point, which has to do with biofeedback of modern technology. So I mentioned earlier that biofeedback is measuring the body, and sometimes we can measure the body to get even more feedback under different conditions. So let's go back to measuring the body temperature. So first thing in the morning, I challenge you to measure your body temperature. Either you can measure the ear temperature through an ear thermometer or an oral thermometer, or underneath the armpit is most accurate. So when you do this, you can figure out what your temperature is. So it should be over 97.8 is the ideal temperature, indicating you have a great metabolism. And that's when we start, called basal body temperature of biofeedback. So now it's possible that your temperature is going to be lower than that. It might be like 96 degrees. So that's kind of like heading towards freezing, like a cold body temperature indicates a slow metabolism. So if you want to lose weight, which most people do, and feel better and have more energy and not have dry skin and not sleep 10 hours a day, then all this has to do with a low thyroid. So in fact, this can help you, even help your doctor indicate that you might have a low thyroid, hypoactive thyroid. So this is why it's very important. So that's so blood pressure is another way to indicate what's going on. So one of the things we do in the clinically we do an old test that's been around for a long time, is we take the blood pressure of somebody laying down, calmly laying down, take their blood pressure, compare the upper, which is the systolic, and the lower, the diastolic number, and their heart rate, their pulse. And then we have them stand up abruptly, quickly as possible, take their blood pressure again and compare those numbers. And if the numbers drop, then that's a sign that they're heading towards a heart attack, that they have weak adrenal glands. And so this is biofeedback. We're actually having the body change position to find out how that biofeedback changes, in this case, blood pressure. So biofeedback is very, very powerful and should be used more extensively than we do. Now, another form of biofeedback that's is effective is CT scans and MRI scans, X-rays, and even blood work. The disadvantage of these other scans of modern technology is that we can't just run an MRI 1 week and then do it again the next week to see the changes. However, if we go to part 3 of this podcast and this topic, we know that in the clinic we can. And so the advantage we have is that we can actually run a scan as frequently as once a week. And if we need to, if we have somebody with a serious condition with, say they have swelling in their legs, we want to monitor their kidney, we know it's the kidney and the heart that's contributing to this kind of swelling, then we can actually run a Zyto Scan, which is originally originated out of Germany, which is an electrical hand scanner that we talked about in another podcast, or a Nest scanner, and we can scan the outside of the body in its electric field. So once we understand the electricity and how it's flowing, how it's blocked, and where it's weak, then we can understand what to do about lifestyle, diet, nutrition, exercise, and even hydration to help improve the body's wellness. So isn't that amazing? I mean, when you think about it, the body is, here we have our bodies that we really rely on more than we realize. So if you just stop for a minute, how powerful that would be to have a tool of biofeedback to be able to measure the ancient ways, as we mentioned, of, looking at your tongue and understanding what that is, which is something we can talk about more in another topic, and understanding your pulse, if it's rapid or slow. And then, of course, modern feedback, such as blood pressure, temperature, CT scans and MRIs. And then finally, the third part that we talked about was using modern technology of ancient medicine to be able to use a Zyto and an S scan. And also kinesiology is another biofeedback that I use on a regular basis in the clinic to find out what organs are weak, how they're doing, and to measure them on a scale from 1 to 10, and then to give you as a patient, what's going on with my organs. And so we can actually match the biofeedback of, say, your lab work with your kidney. Maybe your kidney's not working well, or your liver has high liver enzymes. This just happened for a patient the other day. And he had high liver enzymes. Let's use that as an example. On his blood work, then I tested him physically with kinesiology and the Zyto Scan. We found the right supplement and the right lifestyle. I told him to avoid meat for a while, for 30 days, go on a vegan diet, which would be the best to give the liver a rest. And so I know that when he does that his liver enzymes will drop, as they have for hundreds of patients of mine over the last 20 years, and then he'll return to normal. But the biofeedback of the blood work and the kinesiology and the Zyto Scan is a great combination of this biofeedback to find out what's going on with your body to really save your body and extend your life. So I hope you learned something today. I hope you learned to apply these principles. And if you have questions, you can always check out more of our videos. And for now, be healthy and be well.